Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kesh, and welcome back to day 2 of Autumn Fair 2021. And hello to everyone joining us virtually as we are live on the Autumn Fair app. Right, next up we have a little panel discussing what will the post-pandemic consumer expect from retail. And joining us, we have David Dagger, Marketing and Comms Director from the ICS, Wizz Selvey, Founder, Wizz & Co., Hellen Stirling-Baker, owner of Small Stuff, and that will be hosted by Naeem Arif, founder of NA Consulting. So please put your hands together for the panel, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good afternoon. Welcome to the NEC in Birmingham, which, for those of you who are not from Birmingham, will soon realise that Birmingham is the centre of the UK, one of the most important cities. So welcome to Birmingham. Obviously, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've had a lot of drastic changes to retail and the high street. We've had the situation where we've seen brands like Toys R Us, Mothercare, Maplins, all talk about the fact that they're struggling to trade in the current climate. We then had Brexit, and that knocked the pound and consumer confidence. And then when we thought things couldn't get any worse, we had COVID. So as we're now approaching the golden quarter 2021, which is the run-up to Christmas, I think it's a good time that we understand how will retail fare in this period. And a key component in this is customers, because they choose where to shop. So in this session, we will be asking an important question. What will the post-pandemic consumer expect from retail? Now, my name's Naeem. I'm a director at United Carpets, and I'm the founder of NA Consulting. The panel who will share their expertise today are going to talk about their own experiences. So we've got a mixture of business owners and consultants to give you that varied approach. I'm going to introduce in a moment Hellen Stirling from Small Stuff, David Dagger from the Institute of Customer Service, and Wizz Selvey from Wizz & Co. So let's kick it straight off. And if I ask you to please introduce yourselves, but also follow up with maybe a way in which you've seen the pandemic change customer expectations over the last year to 18 months. And can we start with Hellen, please?
Hi, everyone. So my name's Hellen Stirling-Baker, and I run Small Stuff in Sheffield, which is a eco-conscious children's store. I've been running it for about 6 years. I started by doing pop-up shops around the country, and then during COVID, actually, the business significantly grew. So we moved from quite a small retail shop up the same high street we're on to a 2-story store. And I guess one of the sort of takeaways from COVID and customer expectations is that, for me personally, is customers are now looking for local, friendly brands to shop from. Somewhere that you can get a friendly face, there's a personal service, there's a seamless way of shopping. So aligning your business, if it's bricks and mortar, along with your online presence as well, and making sure they're really succinct is a great sort of way to really encourage people to shop with you. Make it really like a personal approach. People do really want to come to stores and touch things and be there. So making that online presence, if you have one, work really well with that.
Thank you, Helen. Wiz, do you want to follow that up again, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about how you've seen the pandemic's change customer expectations, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, my name's Wizz. I'm the founder of Wizz & Co., a brand and retail strategy agency. And we work with global retailers such as Ocado, Next. My career was at Selfridges for many years, and also just done a project with Fenwick, and also work with corporate brands. But also really passionate about helping the stars of the future, so more independent brand scale. So I do a lot of online education and masterclasses and group coaching as well. So I think the biggest thing I've seen is obviously kind of this shift of customers wanting things on demand, and whether that's certainly things very quickly, whether it's digitally. And now they are returning to shops, which is super exciting, and retail certainly isn't dead. I'm very passionate about making sure that is very well known. But people want to have an experience when they do go into stores. So we've seen a huge amount of closures, everything kind of from Topshop to Debenhams to profit warnings from John Lewis. But actually there's a lot of retailers out there that are really, really investing in the store experience as well. Although John Lewis are in trouble, the stores they're keeping open, they are really heavily investing in them. and the same as, like, for example, the flannels group, obviously part of kind of the Frasers group, but again, they're really expanding into new stores, new locations. And what really excites me is actually things aren't so London-centric, and having worked at 12 years at Selfridges, where there were stores across the country, a lot of brands have always really focused on London and the London consumer. And I think there's always been, I suppose, regional cities or kind of more out-of-town shopping centres that have been forgotten about. And that now we're seeing, I suppose, a much more national picture. And I think it's a great opportunity for brands to be focusing on customer engagement in those areas.
Thank you, Wizz. So David, again, just tell us a little bit about yourself, and also what have you seen change in the last 18 months from a customer's point of view?
Yeah, thanks, Naeem. So I'm David Dagger. I'm the Marketing Communications Director at the Institute of Customer Service. We exist to help organisations to ultimately improve their business performance by providing better customer service. And some of our retail members include the likes of Amazon and John Lewis, Wix. I think some of the changes that we've seen, we do quite a lot of research into this kind of area, and one of the interesting stats that came back was that 66% of consumers think that customer service will be more important following the pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. I think that's quite interesting, but also we're seeing a bit of a divergence in attitudes of some customers, where I think they've come to expect a lot of things instantly or very quickly, and the likes of Amazon have driven this Deliveroo now, where you can get your food delivered to you in 30 minutes, and similar thing happening with groceries now. And I think we're seeing a bit of a tension where organisations now are facing in some of these problems with the pandemic that's caused supply chain issues, add on Brexit to that, and I think people are going to have to understand that actually you can't always have everything straight away, and that businesses who actively manage that and go out and communicate clearly to their customers will be the ones that do better out of it, I think.
Okay, thank you. You gave a stat there. Can I actually just repeat that? 66% of customers?
66% of customers feel that customer service will be more important post-COVID than it was going into it. There's also a similar number who value frontline workers. I think it's about 54% value frontline workers more than they did pre-pandemic as well.
Okay, so we talk about people valuing customer service. A buzzword or a buzz term that is used a lot at the moment is customer experience. Can we just step into that a second, please? For maybe people in the audience who don't understand the difference, or what is a experience? How does that tie in with service? Could you give us some thoughts on that, please? And we'll start with David this time first.
Yeah, sure. So the customer experience really is I suppose, it's defined in different ways, but the way I understand it is that it's every touch point that a consumer has right the way through the journey, and it might involve a purchase of a product or service, but it's everything leading up to that and the experience afterwards. Obviously, customer service is a part of that, and there's different parts as well of the service experience, both pre and post. And I think the organisations that get this right and do it well are the ones that get that emotional connection and understand that it's not just a transaction that is, right, you've come to me, you want to buy this thing, here it is, there you go, see you later. It's how do you involve them in that process? How do you show them that your values, your purposes align with how they think, and build up that relationship over time, that then in turn helps to build loyalty longer term.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to come to Helen in a second, talking about her differentiation and how she separates herself out. Wizz, you advise a lot of brands as a retail strategist. Can you tell us a little bit more, tell the audience a little bit more about other parts of what an experience is, maybe about your customer profiling or something else? What else do you ask people to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm obsessed with customers. Having worked at Selfridges for many years, it's kind of in my blood, and I think they're kind of the leaders quite often in customer experience, certainly in retail theatre as well. But actually, it is more about what happens when you go into a store as well. It's all about how you kind of build that customer relationship over a period of time. And I think as we've seen a huge rise in, I suppose, direct-to-consumer businesses, and whether that's retailers or it's brands, it's even more important to be able to, I suppose, nurture those customers, understand those customers, and have a two-way communication communication with them as well. It's not just about, I suppose, customer service and someone calling up and I've got a complaint, or how can I fix this, or my delivery's late. It's about how you, I suppose, surprise and delight them, how you go over and above, how you remember some of those kind of key things about them. And then as I think you're scaling your business as well, it's how do you start to segment customers? How do you put them into, I suppose, different kind of demographic types of what their interests may be, or maybe kind of, I suppose, that VIP tier as well, to kind of create some real customer loyalty. Because actually, once you start to create customer loyalty, you will then also create kind of brand advocates, and those are the people that are talking about your brand to their friends, which is super, super valuable. And ultimately, that's where this kind of free PR comes in, and I'm super passionate about talking about that a lot, and how you can get to that point. Because ultimately, that's what creates the hype of a brand. And I've kind of launched some of the biggest. I launched Charlotte Tilbury when I was at Selfridges, and actually that brand exploded, and it was, I think we've all purchased something where we've suddenly thought, oh wow, what's this brand? I've suddenly heard about it everywhere. I need to go and check it out. All my friends are talking about it. And that's that sweet spot. Again, what's the magic formula for that? I'm always asked, and if there was one, I'd be very, very rich. But there's lots of different facets that kind of, I suppose, help build that customer engagement. So I'd always encourage people to just brainstorm kind of what all those different touch points are. It's so, so important. And then also think about a great customer experience that we've all had as well. And that could be whether it's potentially in a restaurant or a hotel, or it's buying a product.
Yeah, perfect. So your customer experience is a lot more than just the actual transaction. It's the stuff all around it, as Wizz just described. So if we talk next to Hellen, who runs I'm not going to say a unique, but a very specialised business. And you also talked a little bit earlier when we were talking about how you make sure you personalise and engage. Could you maybe share about what that means practically as a business owner for yourself?
Absolutely. So something that I'm quite passionate about is making sure that the customers are actually sort of leading the way that my shop is created. And that's by setting the correct customer expectations. So going back to when David was talking about if deliveries are late or anything like that, and the customer satisfaction, immediately setting the right expectations. So when someone comes into my store, first of all, it is made for basically mums, with new mums as well. So making sure there's enough room for prams, it's nice smelling, it's really comfortable. Children can open and play with things at the bottom of shelves, where they can walk in and it's just comfortable from the outset. And then as you go through my store, upstairs we have a respite area for parents and carers and grandparents, where they can grab a coffee, have a little sit down. There's a little play area as well. So straight away the customer expectations are set as soon as they walk into the store. And it's the same with the website. So that's come from customer feedback. So at every stage of customer journey, how is your day? And it's not just a, hi, welcome to my store, please let me know if you need something. It's more, how is your day? How are you doing? How are your little ones? Is everything okay with you? Making sure that things are packaged really specially. My store's quite a specialist store. I only stock eco-conscious products that have been traced. And I want that message to be really, really clear from the moment that you step in. So there's lots of signage, clear signage that says where the products are from. There's information, but there's also someone always there to have that conversation. When somebody orders something, whether they order something online or they order it in the store, they get an automatic feedback form, and that feedback form basically says, thank you for shopping with us. If they've shopped with us before, it'll say, thank you for shopping with us again. So again, it's already that personal service. And then a few days later, they'll get a feedback 1 to 10 form, but it's an open opportunity to actually drop us an email, have a chat. What can we do better? Lots of the feedback came around, especially during COVID, was that people were purchasing for gifts where they couldn't see for their families' birthdays and the little kids. So what we started doing was putting personalised notes in, giving the customer the opportunity to have birthday cards, it's specially wrapped. All those extra things as an extra little special, like you're in the store. And the customers loved it. The feedback kept coming. So it's about creating something where you want to be as yourself. So if you, like Wizz said, if you visit a restaurant, you have incredible service, look at what they're doing and bring it back to the stores and the online stores that you are running, and take little snippets of that and what you feel that you'd want to walk into in a store.
Thank you, Helen. So a couple of things I'm just going to pinpoint on what you just said there. One of the things you said is that your store is clearly for your customers. You know, it's designed for moms in prams. So it's not surprising that you're not trying to attract 50-year-old middle-aged men, perhaps. You know, you've customized your store for your target customer, which is brilliant. And the other thing that you said is that you delighted the customers a little bit by saying, welcome back for a repeat business, which is a bit of personalization, which are two really important factors in delivering a great experience. I'm going to come back to something that Wizz said earlier about loyalty. So if I want to grow my business as a business owner, one of the things is we don't just want to have a customer visit us once. We want to have that lifetime value of a customer over a period of time. So again, trying to generalize, you know, you can't give one answer fits all, but what are things that help drive customer loyalty, in your opinion?
A great product, I mean, it always starts with a great product. And again, it's that two-way communication of getting the feedback as well. And it's understanding what the customer wants, what they potentially want to buy alongside the first product that they purchased. How can you encourage them to come back again? And certainly great content in email marketing. I see a lot of businesses that sometimes but don't email that often and don't focus enough on building their email list. And I think there can be an over-reliance on focusing on social media, which can be hugely volatile. New algorithms come in on Instagram, or for example, and it can be hugely challenging to, I suppose, maintain that cut through and that visibility, and a customer might not be seeing you. So actually starting to align content towards your customers is super helpful. Any kind of, I suppose, loyalty program, gifting is also really helpful, because if someone has enjoyed the product themselves, then it's been a really great opportunity to be able to send it to someone else. And actually that was one of the, I suppose, the key things during COVID as well. A lot of people were sending out gifts, and there was a report by WGSN, and the most people that were sending gifts, the key message was just because. So it wasn't even for a reason anymore. It was just that people weren't there, they weren't able to see people, and they just wanted to send something to say that they were thinking about them. So having that kind of functionality on your website is super helpful as well, because you're also then potentially getting a new customer as well by that introduction. So yeah, I think all brands have to think of themselves as content creators as well, which again can be a huge additional job. So I suppose it's where you start with that, and aligning that content to what your customers want to hear about as well. So it's not just about the product, it's what is the values of your brand, what do you think the values of your customers are, and how can you create content that will interest them. So yeah.
Yeah,
lots of different ideas.
And David from the Institute Customer Service, what things are you guys seeing that people are doing well to drive loyalty?
Yeah, so I think probably the number one thing that helps organisations to retain customers is doing what they say they're going to do. It's keeping those promises, and if you can keep those promises, you've got a reliable product that people want, but I think it's really important to actually do what it is that you say you're going to do. And I think where organisations can do that, they've got a reliability of the product. They can deliver it to you in a sustainable, reliable way, and they keep delivering on that promise. The easier it is to keep those levels of trust. And I think trust and loyalty are so closely intertwined that if you're focusing on doing the things that will build customer trust, then you're doing the right things. We break down customer satisfaction into the way we measure it, sort of 5 different categories. So the experience, which includes the product itself, but the actual experience of doing it, how well you deal with complaints, which is an interesting one, because actually if you get things right first time, you don't have a lot of complaints, which is the sort of ideal scenario. Emotional connection, customer ethos, and ethics as well, which is, I think, ethics is probably the area when you look at trust and you look at loyalty has probably been the biggest growth area over the last 5 years or so, and when particularly alongside sustainability, and I think people are looking a lot more at what's your purpose, how are you sustainable, how are you doing the right thing.
Okay, so you said something there which some people may be thinking sounded really simple. You said, you know, as a retailer, do what you've promised. Can you just expand on that a bit? Because some people might think that's really obvious, but that is a really important part of establishing trust, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think there's different aspects to it probably, and I suppose the number one thing is, does the product itself do what it says it's going to do? Are you, if you're delivering it, are you delivering it on time? But then there's also the any follow-up that's there as well. Because I think one of the number one frustrations we see is that it might be difficult to get through to someone, but when they do get through to someone, they speak to them, and it's not necessarily, when it comes to complaints, it's not necessarily about how quickly necessarily you can resolve a complaint, but actually the speed of acknowledging it and saying, right, this is what we'll do about it is really important. That part of it is critical. So when you say, right, we're going to resolve it in this way by this time, make sure you hit that time frame that you've set.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things as business owners, people, or even as employees, sometimes people are in a panic to promise something that they know they can or cannot deliver. I often hear people saying, we'll try and get it to you next week, 100% guaranteed. And in your head, you're thinking, yeah, I've sort of given them a loose target, but what they're hearing is the 100% guaranteed. So it's also a perception issue. Promising to delivering what you promise is a really important thing. And I guess in a small business, without being rude, that's growing, how have you managed that? Is there anything particular you do, Helen?
Yeah, so with from the beginning, the whole message within all of my tiny team is that acknowledge, align, assure. So setting those correct expectations from the word go. So before any sort of promises are made, which is really important, making sure that the customer fully understands what your journey looks like. So again, going back to this transparency and being honest, if you know that you have a product that's out of stock, one thing for us is books at the moment, so things going out of stock. If you don't know when that's coming in, let the customer know. 9 times out of 10, that customer will either say, I'll put it on back order, I'll order it now and you just let me know, or they'll come back and say, actually, do you know what then? I'll choose some other bits. So customers don't actually mind as long as you're telling them the truth and setting them the correct expectations. So I think it's really important, that honest and trust piece throughout the whole sort of business model. But the way that I do that is the first bit of training with my staff is making sure we're all aligned on that kind of journey and that those are the key qualities that I ask for, and the sort of idea that it's okay not to have something immediately, and most of the time customers will understand that.
So being honest with your customers is an important part of trust. When we've got our trust up here, customers will buy anything, would you say, from you? They're more likely to buy from you, whereas if the trust is down here, they won't?
I would think so. I mean, if I went into, especially the sort of business that I do, the whole ethos behind my brand is being transparent as much as possible and showing people where my products come from. So if I slip up and there's a chain that breaks along that way, well, they'll question the whole sort of business, what I'm in. So it's really important, to get those returning customers, be honest, open, transparent. And if another thing that you were saying was about social media, don't be scared to be honest on there as well. Customers really do appreciate that. I think it's important to say you don't have to be sort of squeaky clean. We can do everything immediately all of the time. Sometimes it's okay to say, actually, do you know what? We've got stock issues, but we've got these other great products that are available. People will say, brilliant, at least now we know.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've been talking about customer expectations post-pandemic for retail. Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about something which has been around for a while now. Let's talk about electronic retail, online retail, e-commerce. I'll kick you off by saying, from my point of view, I see e-commerce as being a little bit different to e-retail in terms of just having a transaction site versus actual retail being a bit more of a social activity. We'll start with Wizz again, if you don't mind. What do you see Wizz, or which brands are you working with which maybe are doing a good job or a bad job in this area, please?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to content is absolutely crucial, I think, with online retailing. And I think some of the best online retailers that have scaled very quickly, Cult Beauty is one that's been in the news very recently, because recently we bought by the Hut Group in kind of the beauty category. And they've been the absolute leaders in online content, because actually as a retailer and you're a house of brands and you're selling other people's brands, how do you compete when it's very easy to Google something and you can just buy something based on price? But actually, they've really invested in content creation, having their own tone of voice, sourcing kind of the hottest, newest, most exclusive brands. But what they've done really well is created a lot of content on their product pages, which is something that I find a lot of brands and retailers really miss out on, because that is the point of conversion as well. That's where that decision-making process is being made. A lot of people just have generic, similar copy that's on everybody else's website, but it doesn't give them a tone of voice or kind of a reason why to buy that. And that can be done through text. It can be done through alternative imagery. A big fan of infographics. They can take a while to think about, but once you have them, they can be super valuable to help people understand why that product is right for them. So I think it's a combination of being a content creator, but then also there's then the Amazons of this world where we're just really impatient. If we want something the next day, then a lot of people are just prepared to go to Amazon as well. So it's getting harder and harder to compete, and I suppose get the cut through as well.
So we talk about content there, and sometimes people get a bit confused about what content is. Let's talk about it from two different perspectives. So Hellen, from your point of view, what kind of content do you put out? How do you manage it? What's the overhead like, or the time commitment like?
So it's really important, specifically within my business, to have the way I speak and the way that my voice is within my business. So content's a huge part of what I personally do. I wouldn't hand that to another member of staff. However, what I would say is if you are going to invest in creating content on your website, for example, make sure that you pay somebody to do those really important things like building a website. It's really important to add those other little bits in where you can have your voice across. So I have videos, I have a social media stream on my website as well, so people can keep up to what I've got. I have newsletters that go out that I personally write. So yeah, it does take up a lot of time, but it's an important aspect of the business, that the business still has my voice going through it. But the other jobs, I give them to somebody else that knows what they're doing. I pay somebody to take my photographs that are a little bit different, so they're not the same stock images that are on every other website. I pay someone to run the rest of my website because I don't know how to do that. So that would be where the time constraints are. But the bits that I know about and how my business I want my business to be run, I do those bits. And that's the way it keeps going throughout my social media as well.
Okay. So David, obviously, the Institute of Customer Service works with a lot of varied sized businesses, some bigger. Are you seeing an advantage if you're a big organisation with a lot of money to throw at this versus, say, a small organisation who may not have that much money or budget to build that brand and build that presence?
I don't necessarily think on this particular aspect it's a big versus small. I don't think there is any advantage to being big, because ultimately if you're an independent retailer and you're able to have that control and you've got the ideas, you don't have to run it past your agency and your board or whoever you need to get approval for a new idea. You can just run with it the next day. So I don't think it's necessarily that. Big companies generally have the advantage of big budgets and the ability to be able to, take over Twitter for a day if that's what they want to do. But I think it's about authenticity, and a lot of what Helen's just said, everything she's doing there is authentic to her brand, and it's right for her. And if you're a big organisation and it is part of your identity that you have a sustainable attitude, and you do run a campaign on that highlights some of the behind-the-scenes things that other people might not be aware of, then that's fine. But if it's more superficial, if it's something that comes across as greenwashing, then I think it can play very badly.
Okay. No, good. Thank you. And of course, most of our businesses are run by people. People can make mistakes. Human beings can make mistakes. Something can happen in the supply chain, or people can make a physical mistake. And complaints are an everyday part of business, aren't they? So dealing with complaints can be a really important way into converting and retaining a customer. I've seen plenty of customers complain, and then you do a good job of dealing with the complaint. What are you guys seeing over the last 18 months, 2 years, based on your research and everything else, about complaints and how people are handling them, please?
So I think actually complaints really interesting, because twice a year we publish the UK Customer Satisfaction Index. So it's kind of the barometer of customer satisfaction in the UK. And we've generally been seeing a decline in customer satisfaction for the last 3 years, more or less. It did actually pick up in July, slight uptick. But when we delve behind the numbers, it was quite interesting. So what we saw was, in fact, there was a higher number of complaints, but satisfaction with dealing with those complaints was up as well. So what we think might be happening is that some organisations, rather than addressing the root cause and getting more things right first time, they are actually throwing a bit of money at trying to get the complaints part of it right. And I can't tell you how exactly, but the data does suggest that you can increase satisfaction by dealing with those complaints in a successful way. So there is definitely an opportunity there. I would strongly argue that you're far better focusing on improving your systems, cutting down on the complaints. But failing that, actually, you do also need to invest in being able to service post-complaint as well.
Okay, and there's, I haven't got any stats with me, but I know there's plenty of research which confirms that, increasing your customer satisfaction level a single % has a definite pound note attribute to that as well. Who are some of the brands that you've seen who have done, say, well over the last 18 months and during the pandemic? Because we had a lot of complaints, we had a lot of issues. What have you seen some people do good and some people do bad, please?
So I'm probably not the person to ask for individual instances. We don't tend to single out bad experiences. We work with organisations, we work with our members to help them. So confidentially, we will have those sort of scenarios, and we'll help organisations deal with that. I mean, it is interesting because every 6 months we will publish the top 10 by each of the 5 categories I mentioned earlier, and complaints is one of those. And you've got some that are perennially high in that. Now, again, it does suggest that they're getting more complaints than other organisations, but they are dealing with it well. Trivago is one, actually, that always seem to do really well in the complaints handling perspective. And also, from personal experience as well, I'd say Amazon, when things do go wrong, and they rarely do go wrong, and I think they do put a lot of stock into how the process works, the supply chain and everything else. But are also very good at resolving issues, and that's, I think, a way that they generate loyalty there. So they're probably 2 good examples that we've seen through the pandemic.
Okay, no problem, thank you. Wizz, I'm going to come to the same question with yourself. In terms of complaints, what do you advise people to do when they get a complaint, how to deal with it? I mean, particularly things like Google reviews. Sometimes people are very scared of Google reviews. What's your thinking in this area, or what is your advice to people who maybe are getting complaints and not sure how to handle them?
Yeah, I think it's always going over and above. And yeah, how can you, I suppose, as well as fix the problem, do something else, I suppose, to surprise them, or gift them something, or give them a voucher, or send them something they weren't expecting. And again, I think it goes back to when you go out for a meal in a restaurant, and if a dish doesn't come, or there's a hair in it, or who knows, there's a problem. If they suddenly give you a free dessert or a free bottle of wine, all of a sudden you leave and you've just had an amazing experience, and then you'll talk about it and like, oh, weren't they nice? It's like, how do you apply that to your business as well in retail? I think it's very easy to solve and then actually convert that into something that's really, really positive. But yeah, it's dealing with it, and then what else can happen. I think the Google review on it is certainly a challenge. Hopefully you can deal with something before it gets to that stage of going on Google reviews.
Thank you. Helen? I don't think you get any complaints, but in the instance that you did ever get one.
I think it goes back to that expectation piece, setting the right expectations in the first instance, but if you are to have a complaint or something comes through that you were, that could be avoided and went wrong, is talking to the customer, being honest, speaking to them directly. Don't just send an email, speak to them, find out what the problem is. Because most times as well, when you actually speak to them on the phone, they go, oh, yeah, it wasn't actually that bad. But yeah, speaking to them on the phone, setting then the right expectations. So if it's something that needs sorting, give them a time frame that you can work to. So again, when things are resolved, they knew what was coming. So yeah, a friendly sort of service and an expectation. I went recently, just as an example, to a holiday club, a very well-known holiday club, and one of the things that happened was we'd gone somewhere and they didn't have our name on the list, but we'd pre-booked, and they sent us somewhere else, and then they sent us somewhere else, and we were wandering around this holiday camp, and all we wanted to do was go swimming. And I remembered that little bit out of the whole holiday was what a nightmare that was. And the rest of the holiday was fantastic, but all I took away from that was, oh, do you know, they sent us over there, and we couldn't go swimming, and oh, that's a whole terrible week. So picking up with that customer immediately, zoning in on them and saying, right, what can we do to help? What's going to make things better? Speaking to them on the phone, 9 times out of 10 it will just get resolved.
Okay, thank you. And one of the things I want to add, if I may, is something that people don't do is apologise.
Yeah.
So one of the things I always advise is that if there is a problem, even if it's not your fault, I always start with, and I always advise, to start with, we're sorry we haven't met your expectations.
Yeah.
That doesn't admit any liability, but sometimes people want to hear that. And the other thing is, just let the customer sometimes talk. Because sometimes I hear complaints, and it's literally like the customer just needs to get something off their chest. So, handling your complaints personally, I think, is a really important thing. And it's a definite way to get customers to come back again and again. So in terms of, let's come back to something you talked about earlier. The high street isn't dead, you said. It's something we've been hearing for ages. From my point of view, shopping isn't just that transaction. There's a definite social element. My kids will go to town on the weekend just to get out and see some friends. We're seeing more electronic retailing. All that is happening. We are now seeing people coming back, like we're seeing today, face to face. I'll ask the loaded question. If someone said to you the high street was dead, what would you say? We'll start with David on this one. What would you say if someone says to you the high street is dead or it's dying?
Okay, so I would say it's definitely not dead. I'd say the city centres, definitely stunned maybe, not dead. And I think post-COVID, they will come back. How strongly they come back, I think, will depend on how well the relevant stakeholders get together. And it's going to take retailers, it's going to take hospitality industry, it's going to take local government and planners, potentially the government on business rates as well, which has been a problem for a long time. But I think if we can get the mix right, more pedestrianisation of city centre high streets as well. And, wouldn't it be great? Let's get some music there, let's get some live performance, let's get that experience there, some street food, whatever it is. And so reinvigorate those high streets. Also mix in more residential with some of those blocks. I think you talked about John Lewis, and there's a lot of big areas that would probably benefit from being mixed use. So a bit more office on the high street, a bit more residential, and so on. But I think what we have seen that I think may be partly temporary, but will also have a long-lasting effect is. People have perhaps moved from doing more of their shopping in city centres to more local high streets. And, I've seen some of my local high streets absolutely reinvigorated. If you go down, so Peckham's a good example, and you go down Peckham Rye, and there's a multi-storey car park where they now have a cafe on top, retail on the bottom, and all sorts. So they have sort of live orchestral events on one of the levels, and it's just an amazing experience to be in this sort of vibrant high street. You go down there, and each week there's something new to experience and new to see. It also mixes in some of the old veg sellers with all the new, trendy T-shirt shops. Do you know what I mean? And it works. And so I think, city centres where they've just become far too many, or town centres in particular, where there's too many charity shops, too many betting shops, planners and local authorities have to take responsibility to say, if we keep allowing this to happen, then they are going to die. So they are at risk, but I think it's an opportunity to, don't want to say build back better, but to rebuild after COVID.
Okay, thank you. Wizz, what can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, retail certainly isn't dead. It's just, I suppose it's the fastest changing time I think there's been. And people just shopping in different ways. And I think a lot more people working at home. They're not necessarily commuting into cities or towns or kind of into London. London has certainly been very quiet. And it's starting to come back, and those big destination stores have been packed. So I was in Harrods on Friday, and it was literally buzzing. It was amazing. So people are going back to those destination stores and those experiences. But some of Oxford Street is quite sad. There's a lot of empty units on there. A lot of things have shut down. But actually, I think it's an amazing opportunity for these local high streets. People do want to shop local. People want to think about where they're spending their money. And there's this kind of element of conscious consumerism where people are thinking about what they're spending, who they're spending it with, and why. And people want to have something that's kind of a bit nicer and better value. And I think certainly people have spent a lot more on food and have got used to that, shopping more locally, whether that's kind of with butchers and greengrocers as well. And actually, I think it's, again, creating more of a hybrid rather than just chains of shops that do the same thing. Well, of course, nobody wants to go into those because it's just pretty dull,
It's
really.
just the same, isn't it?
And if it are those shops, then they've got to be a real hub as well. So I think Next have done a great job. They don't have their store shop fits aren't that I suppose expensive or exciting, but actually they're very, very convenient for click and collect, for online, for Amazon drop-offs. You can get your coffee there, and they've kind of really reinvented their own stores, and certainly there's some of those out-of-town ones as well, because they know that they've got to get the footfall in there. So it's more than just a shopping experience.
No,
it's just
definitely.
changing quickly.
Thank you. And, you gave a couple of examples there. And before I pass over to Helen, certainly your business is not going to be one where people are going to worry about conscious shopping, because you built your brand, and the points talked about earlier about telling your story. Is your business going to survive on the high street, or will people come to you because of what you offer?
Absolutely. I think the high street is far from dead, and I've seen that. I'm on a local sort of high street. I'm not in the city centre. I think it's a really great, perfect time for the city centres to really kind of, I hate the word, but pivot, in the sense that getting more independence in there. That's something that's a really exciting thing, especially in Sheffield city centre. So working closely with and collaborating with the local councils. But on my sort of little strip, it's just full of independence. And we are the ones that have been there throughout the whole of the pandemic for our customers. And our customers are remembering that, and they want to shop with us. They want that experience of going into a store. They want to touch the products. They want to know my story. We've recently been certified for the second year as the Planet Mark. So we've got something behind us to say we are really trying to do all these things that we say we want to do. So it's a full circle, really. It's that honesty, that trust, that loyalty. It's getting people back in the store that we've been there through the last 18 months, and people are remembering that. So I think it's something I'm massively passionate about, but I just do not think that the high street is dead. I think it's on a great opportunity at the moment to really make something better looking forward.
Yeah, brilliant. And just in that little segment, I think you've all shared some really important things. And again, coming back to what we talked about earlier, you've got a target market for your customers, for your businesses. You've also got to try and pick up things which will make people come to you and be very specific for your customers. We're talking today about consumer expectations changing after pandemic. We are coming to the end of our time very shortly. I'm going to ask another couple of questions, and then we are going to open up for questions from the floor. So if you have some questions, I think, is there going to be a mic coming around? Yeah. So just as we're wrapping up today, and you've all shared some really fabulous insights, possibly a really tough question, but a good one to end with, I think. If you were looking back at yourself, we'll start with Helen. If we're looking back at yourself, your business self, 2 years ago from where we are today, back in when we didn't know what was going to happen with Brexit, is there a key piece of advice you would give yourself then, which would be very relevant now for any business which is going to be trying to grow and get its doors back open over the next 6 months or a year?
Get my business plan and rip it up into a billion pieces, probably. But I think, just being able to change and pivot quite quickly. So knowing that things are going to go wrong, and think, okay, we couldn't have ever thought that this was what was going to happen. But having a contingency plan in place and being true to your own brand, so you understand if there is something that changes and happens and it's huge, we never expect it to close for however many months, but knowing that, okay, I'm in control of this, my staff are in control of this, how can we look forward and keep this positive? Yeah. So rather than having a really strict, focusing on sort of details in business plans and things like that, you need to be a bit more open and a bit more open to change, how things are changing, keep up with retail trends, all those other things, but focusing on what is the underlying purpose of why am I running this business, and keeping that value really, really clear.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. And you said two things there. One was obviously stay true to your brand, which I really liked. But the other one was saying being a bit more agile. We've only said pivot at least once today, which is pretty good. But just being prepared to change, because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, don't expect different results sometimes. So be prepared to change. Very good. Thank you. Wizz, some advice you'd give yourself or a client of yours in going forward?
Yeah, I think it's being focused, and it's not about having that really detailed business plan, but it's actually having a roadmap. So what is your strategy? What's your direction of travel? And how do you kind of stay on that direction? I think as kind of business owners myself, and I work with a lot of brand founders as well, there's really an overwhelm with how much there is to do. So how can you really think about what that strategy is and how you need to get there? And get some support as well, get a community, kind of get some like-minded people that you can work with. And this is what I've been really proud that I've kind of created in the last 18 months, is kind of a platform to be able to help more brands to be able to scale. And also that they can then connect with each other as well, because you're not on your own. It can feel like you are if you're a brand founder with a small team. But actually, there's lots of opportunities out there, but try not to overwhelm yourself. So staying focused is really key.
Thank you, Reese. And David, apart from paying attention to the Institute of Customer Service and the content you put out, what other kind of advice would you give to somebody who wants to try and grow their business over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, well, I actually think Helen and Wizz nailed it, really. I think agility has been a really key thing through the last 18 months. And I think we've seen organisations that have been able to think on their feet and really put new plans into action pretty quickly have done really well. And then that focus as well, which is so important, is this tension, I think, between being ambitious, and I think so many organisations saw the acceleration in the transformation and change they were able to put in place. So I think that ambition is good, but unless it's tempered with a focus on the important things, it can be a little bit dangerous as well. So I think it's that focus combined with being maybe pushing yourself a bit more sometimes as an organisation and doing that. I mean, the three things we come back to, and the three things we will talk to our members about would be purpose, relevance, and impact. So be clear about your purpose and why you're relevant, who would miss you if you weren't here, and what's the impact that you can have for your customers.
Okay, I like that. So purpose, relevance, and impact. Now, I like that. Thank you. I'd like to thank our panelists today who've shared some insights, and I think you'll all agree that they've shared some, honest thoughts. There's nothing corporate about it here. It's all been very nice to listen to everybody. Just before we take some questions, how do we get in contact with you all?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Find me, I don't tweet much, but certainly on LinkedIn. Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, LinkedIn and Instagram, Wizz & Co.
Everything. Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Yes, I'm all on there. smallstuff_UK.
Perfect, thank you. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you can find me at NA Consulting. Do we have any questions for the panel? The first question is always the hardest one to get out of someone. If we don't, you can all go on and get some donuts.
We have got a couple questions from the online audience, if that's okay.
Yeah.
For a new business, do you think it is important to add reviews to your website to build trust?
Okay, so I think that's a bit of a leading question in terms of artificial reviews or real reviews. It doesn't say that, does it? But
I think maybe add a section to leave reviews.
okay, right. So maybe add a section to leave reviews. I'm going to start with Helen on this one.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure they're real reviews. Don't make up reviews. But one thing I saw specifically during COVID was as soon as I put reviews on specific products, the opportunity for people to review them, sales of those products actually went up. So yeah, I think it's really important, especially for an online presence. Again, gaining that trust. It just goes back to trust, really.
Wizz?
Yeah, 150%. Absolutely. Genuine reviews. And also, how can you reward people for doing it as well if you need to get a bit of traction on that? And also, sometimes providing a bit of a framework or a couple of questions of what they could feed back on as well, because you could say what you think. They're just like, yeah, lovely, great. But if you try and craft, I suppose, quite a specific question, then it helps people answer them and makes it just easier for them as well.
David?
Yeah, nothing more to add than that, really. It's an important trust builder, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just add a little bit on myself. So I think it's also important to understand you've got your Facebook reviews and your Google reviews. I've personally always gone towards Google reviews because I think people go to their phone and go and Google you straight away. And as Helen was saying before, if you use your Google reviews, you can also add different product photos, and that just adds a level of authenticity, doesn't it? And Google gives you lots of stats, so I can clearly see every week how many phone calls, how many searches we get, and I think that's a great way to grow your business, definitely. You got another question?
Yep. Do you think email marketing is more effective than social media? If you are time poor, what is the best to focus on?
So email marketing versus social media, and which would you focus on if you were time poor? Can we start with David first?
Yeah, sure. So I think you need to have both, but building on what Wizz said earlier, I think email gets more neglected and I think is a bigger opportunity. If you build your email list, those are people that want to hear from you, want to engage with you, and it can be difficult, in my experience, always to get that two-way conversation, which is so valuable, which social can be good for, and social can be better for reaching out to new customers, but I think focus on the people that really want to hear from you, that you've already got that relationship with.
Thank you. Wiz?
Yeah, absolutely email marketing, because you can get direct sales from sending those emails. It takes time to build, and often you'll use social media to try and build those sales as well. But yeah, it's super important to keep the engagement going. So, and there's lots of some great platforms out there. There's a one called Klaviyo, which is just kind of just boomed at the moment. And if you're not on it, move from MailChimp. Sorry if anyone's from MailChimp here. Or Active Campaign if you're service-based. And they're very user-friendly as well. So it's making it much easier for you to analyse the data and looking at what's working and yeah, just be able to write them yourself.
Helen, what do you do in that instance? Social, email, what do you do, please, from your perspective?
So I built my emails marketing list up from my socials, really, and from sales. So, but I spend more time on the email marketing now. But what I would say, depending on the kind of voice of your business, don't keep it really salesy. Don't just keep sending products for them to buy. They'll get opened and then closed. Keep it exciting. So if there's more information, what are you doing? What's next on the agenda? Keep it exciting for people to want to open those things. But yeah, it takes time, like Wiz said, to build those lists. The great thing is now, obviously, GDPR, you have to say if you want them or not. So people genuinely, if they're ticking that, they do want to hear from you. And keep it going as well. Don't do one and then one in a year. Keep it going, so keep yourself relevant, but not too much.
And I'll just add to that almost like your social is instant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can do something on social media, which is, we've just had this new piece of work done in our business or something, and it just telling your story keeps you front of mind. So it's also, again, what you said earlier about it's relevant to each different business, isn't it? Any more questions?
Do we have any from the audience before I ask one more?
I think everyone wants to get some donuts. I had a donut from that Dum Dum earlier. It was really good, and I've got to take some home.
That's a plug, isn't it? It's a free donut for you.
Last thing from me then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again to the audience. Thank you again for the audience for being here, and thank you again for the panel. Please follow them on social and also enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you.